Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, Kathleen Romero, a renter in the city of Oakland and a hotel worker and a Teamster, and I urge you to support this bill. Thank you
so much.
Good morning, Shanta Pekin on behalf of the California Apartment Association in support.
Thank you.
Barry Broad with the Teamsters in support.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Guy Fuson with the Sacramento County Tax Collectors. On behalf of the Tax Collectors Association, we're in support for a level playing field. Thank you.
Sarah Flox, California Labor Federation, in support.
Megan Brightwell on behalf of the California Professional Firefighters, in support.
Thank you.
Bob Planthold. I'm a disabled San Francisco senior who wants the protections and benefits this affords so we can stay in our homes. Please pass it.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Jack Ribbon. I represent Unite Here, the Hotel and Casino Workers Union in the United States and Canada, and we are very much in support of this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Karen Lang on behalf of the California Association of County Treasurers and Tax Collectors, 8 individual tax collectors in the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors, all in strong support of the measure today. Thank you.
Lucy Menars, Unite Here, and I'm in support to protect good union jobs as well as fair housing for working families.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning. Sherry McHugh representing the Pacific Association of Domestic Insurance Companies. We are working with the author and we are in support of the bill. Thank you.
Nan Brazemer, president of the California Alliance for Retired Americans, and my 950,000 members want our cities and counties to have these additional funds. We are in support.
Thank you.
Peter Cohen with the Council Committee. Housing organizations, we're a coalition of affordable housing organizations in San Francisco, very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Taylor with Unite Here, Local 49, and a hotel worker at Thunder Valley Casino Resort to express support for the bill.
Thank you so much.
Sydney Gums, I'm also here with Unite Here, Local 49, and I am also a worker at Thunder Valley, and we are in support.
Thank you so much.
Carmen Fernandez from California Alliance for Retired Americans, strongly support you, and thank you very much.
Carol Bailey, also up from the destination vacation spot of Stockton, and with the California Alliance for Retired Americans, strongly in support. They aren't the bargain. We're seniors. We've looked into them. We look for all the bargains, and we travel a lot.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Henny Kelly, Senior Disability Action in San Francisco, and the United Educators of San Francisco, the Teachers Union, are in support, and the teachers love getting that extra money into the city budget. Thank you.
Danny Friedman on behalf of the California Association of Boutique and Breakfast Inns in support of the bill.
Sure.
Jerry Bailey, retired sofa surfer, and Alliance for Retired Americans, California Alliance for Retired Americans, in support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Andrea Gorman. I'm a retiree and I'm a member of the Machinists Union. I'm very proud to be very active with the California Alliance for Retired Americans. I'm very proud. I've always paid my taxes, knowing it was going to help my family, my community, and everybody else. And I hope to see everybody else continue to pay their taxes as well. Thank you for writing the bill.
Good afternoon. This is Luis Santoyo. I'm a representative of North Bay Jobs with Justice. We're an alliance of 17 unions and community-based organizations in Sonoma County. Among those organizations, the Teamsters, the United Food and Commercial Workers, Unite Here, SEIU, among others. And we're very much in support of this bill. Thank you.
Hi, Ian Lewis, Hotel and Restaurant Workers of San Francisco and San Mateo, Unite Here, Local 2, in support. Thank you.
Derek Smith, representing Unite Here, Local 11, in strong support of this bill.
Thank you.
Donald Stevens, Local 986, Southern California Teamsters, strongly support this bill.
Good morning. John Johnson, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 856, in strong support.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Egal Gios, 856 Teamsters, San Bruno, fully support the bill. Thank you.
Tess Wellborn for the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. We really need this tool to help us keep our affordable housing in San Francisco. Thank you.
Hi, Mike Alberton, Teamster, Local E56 San Bruno, speaking in support of the bill. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Angela Kwan, and I'm from Sonoma County, where there is a 1% vacancy rate, and there's a housing crisis, and we could really use this money for affordable housing, and I support this bill.
Thank you.
Hey, Trish Suzuki, Teamsters 856, representing members from the public and private industry from Mendocino down to Visalia.
Hi, my name is Neela Yarborough, and I'm with HRC San Francisco. And first off, I'd like to apologize for my snoring. I have sleep apnea. I'm quite sure everybody heard me. And we strongly support this bill. Thank you very much.
Jeff Otter with UAW Local 5810. University of California postdocs were in support of the bill, particularly as renters in very expensive neighborhoods around UC campuses in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, and everywhere else in the state. Also, as publicly funded researchers, we're interested in seeing public funds increased, and yeah, we support this bill. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Maldonado, Executive Director of the North Bay Labor Council, AFL-CIO, and Marin, Sonoma, Lake counties, and Mendocino. We support very strongly and thank Senator McGuire for this reasonable, fair, and moderate bill that just asks people to pay their fair share. And I'm also a renter, so thanks, Mike.
I'm Kathy Picali from the Older Women's League in San Francisco. We support this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Chair, committee members. My name is Jack Buckhorn. I'm business manager of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 551, Santa Rosa, California. We strongly support the bill to give local autonomy to communities and to allow these businesses to pay their fair share to maintain the communities, the parks, the roads, and everything else that makes our communities desirable. So thank you for your support of the bill.
Good morning, Dennis Hubbard, California Alliance for Retired Americans, and also representative to Sacramento Central Labor Council. Strong support. Thank you.
Hubbard. Others in support?
Good morning. Sam Rodriguez on behalf of United Food and Commercial Workers, 160,000 workers in the state of California, strongly in support of this legislation. And we thank the author and Senator Leno from San Francisco.
Thank you. Others in support? Those in opposition, if you can make room for them, I'd appreciate it.
Jennifer Speck with the California Association of Realtors. We're actually seeking amendments and working with the author currently to exempt real estate licensees from the provisions of the bill. Currently, real estate licensees are regulated by the California Bureau of Real Estate, and thus they are subject to enforcement and oversight by their regulator, and they are also required to comply with all state and local requirements.
By the way, did we hear about this? This is the first time I heard that you're working with the realtors on amendments on this. Did staff hear this? We haven't seen anything. This was just handed to us is what you're talking about for the realtors? Is this what you're handing out?
It's League of Cities.
Oh, this is League of Cities. Okay. Do you have any amendments that you're talking about with respect to the realtors? Have you written anything?
We would be happy to transmit them to you if you would like to see them.
Yeah, please.
We submitted them to the author. We were attempting to work out a deal with the author as we move the bill forward.
The committee hadn't seen them. I'm just trying to keep a track of all the amendments that are coming through.
Simply put, the amendments that we're seeking would exempt real estate licensees from the definition of a hosting platform.
I got it. I got it, but we got to see it, you know. Certainly Senator Pavley knows that from the last hearing. Okay, opposition, who wants to start? We'll make room for you. Just want to start. Who wants to lead off? Okay.
Take it. Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you, Chair Hertzberg, and others who have put an immense amount of time into thinking about this.
Yourself for the record.
I'm sorry, my name is David Owen on behalf of Airbnb.
Thank you, sir.
I do want to thank you all for the time today. Thank the sponsor here for raising these important issues. And I want to acknowledge that all of the testimony that you heard from speakers are raising legitimate issues, and they're things that we are working on and have been engaging with cities across the state of California and indeed around the country, and in some places around the world as well. As a 6-year-old company founded here in California, homegrown company, we're very proud to be here today speaking on behalf of almost 40,000 middle-income Californians who use Airbnb as hosts and hundreds of thousands of Californians who travel using the platform, and those numbers are growing regularly. And we're very excited to speak on their behalf. Just to give you a sense of the context of this movement, this new business around the world, There are now more than 1 million hosts in cities, nearly 33,000 around the world, who use Airbnb. The overwhelming majority of hosts on our platform are sharing the home in which they live. And they're doing so largely to make ends meet and to earn extra income to pursue their passions. In just 1 year, our community generated nearly $312 million of economic activity in just the city of Los Angeles alone, over $450 million of economic activity in the city of San Francisco in just 1 year. We're very excited to be at the forefront of a movement which is enabling people to make more efficient use of their assets and to foster this new behavior and this new activity. And I want to just talk about a few of the issues that have been raised here today, because we've heard a lot of discussion about local planning and zoning issues and challenges, and those are issues that we're engaged in conversations with cities around the state and around the country in finding solutions to addressing, and no two cities are the same, and I think these issues are largely and best dealt with at the local level in planning commissions and city councils around the state. And when we look at this legislation, you'd think that it was a planning and zoning bill based on the testimony, but indeed it's presented as a tax revenue measure. And in fact, I want to discuss two critical issues that raise concerns for us along those lines. The first is this issue of privacy. This bill represents an unprecedented foray into requiring third parties, internet platforms like ours, to hand broad swaths of user data over to local bureaucrats who could presumably sift through it in looking for planning code violations and others. And this is distinct from tax collection data. Cities around the state have broad authority to request data from all sorts of taxpayers and other interested parties. And as anyone who's paid their taxes, which we all here have, knows that data is kept confidential by taxpayers and with good, by tax collectors, and with good reason. There are good policy reasons behind keeping taxpayer data confidential to maximize tax receipts and tax compliance. And that is critically different than compelling companies and internet platforms. And I think you'll hear from other folks here today who have concerns about this. That's critically different than compelling internet platforms to hand over user data for enforcing planning or zoning or other issues. There are better ways to enforce these laws, and requiring those types of laws, which frankly is unparalleled, even in instances of national security or where people's lives are in harm's way, government has warrant requirements or subpoena requirements to request user data from internet platforms to enforce those laws. And we, in fact, work with governments around the world to assist them in those circumstances, but in no case has a law been approved and enforced upon where this type of data must be handed over outside of a subpoena or a warrant simply to aid the enforcement of local planning and zoning laws. It is a significant concern for our community. Additionally, this bill, proposed as a tax compliance measure, treats California corporations like ours, homegrown companies, in an unfair and different manner. There are efforts by the sponsor, and we recognize and appreciate them, to adjust this legislation. But to be quite honest, when the city of San Francisco recently approved legislation which included tax requirements for all platforms like ours, and we've been collecting and remitting that tax in San Francisco since last year, for the record, but when that legislation was approved, within 1 week, a Texas-based corporation filed suit to challenge that law and was successful. So in terms of the applicability, so we see issues with fairness and applying this law equally when we're talking about extending those obligations to corporations that are not based here in the state of California. I think to close, and I'm sure folks might have questions, I'm happy to respond to some of the issues that were raised by both the sponsor and some of the other speakers. But this is a blunt instrument. It's a complicated issue. It's a complicated piece of legislation. And as this new industry really takes off, and we're not just a vacation rental company, we really, and you'll hear from a lot of folks here today, these are people who are opening their homes to visitors from around the country and around the world. This is a new movement, and as we think through the right ways to regulate that movement, as well as to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share of taxes, it's important to take the time to get it right. We don't need to compel massive amounts of user data to be handed over. We don't need to offload local planning and zoning enforcement onto internet platforms some based here in California, which may or may not be able to comply, others in other states or countries which have no interest and will fight tooth and nail. So as we move through this, I think it's important to step back, to take the time and to get this regulation right. I appreciate your time here today.
Thank you. Senator Hernandez has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I've never used you, but kind of explain to me your business model. Is it when, say, I call you or go on the line, want to rent a house from somebody else, do I pay you for that house? Yeah. So explain to me the process, and then you pay the homeowner. Is that how it goes?
Sure. So as a platform, a host, and there are some here today you'll hear from, lists their home or their property on the platform. And we create tools that enable guests to contact hosts. They can communicate before they complete a booking, and we have a reciprocal review system. So if you'd like to stay in someone's home that's listed on our platform, you have the ability to read reviews from previous guests who have stayed there. And in fact, the host also has the ability to read the reviews that folks have left for you if you've happened to stay and use the platform previously. You can communicate by email through the platform to ask and address any questions you have. And then once you book, at that time of booking, we collect the funds from the guest, and within 24 hours of the initiation of the stay, we remit 97% of those fees to our hosts. And we charge an additional administrative fee on top of, if say, Senator Morlock listed his home for $100 a night, he would receive $97. You might pay $105, and that $5 might be our administrative fee.
Okay, so at that time, do you collect any of the TOT fees that go to the particular cities as well?
So in a number of jurisdictions already, we are doing so, and in Portland, San Francisco, Malibu, San Jose, and some other cities here domestically and abroad, we now collect that TOT at the time of the transaction, and based on the independent agreements we have with these cities, we remit them periodically, either quarterly or monthly.
But do you require, or do you make sure that every municipality that has one and you collect it for those particular municipalities, or are you moving in that direction?
So in the cities where we are doing so already, it's not optional. When we turn that function on the website, it applies to 100% of the transactions. And I think as you see, we began, the first city where we were collecting and remitting was in Portland in July of last year. Now we're doing it in I want to say 8 to 10 cities, and are in productive conversations with a number of other cities, and that program is clearly increasing.
Okay, so for your,
But please, go ahead.
I have a couple more questions.
Of course.
Yeah. So for your host homes, after you pay them so I'm renting Morlock's home, he's got a beautiful home, and I'll rent his home, and you pay him $97, and you keep your whatever. Do you send him a 1099?
So we do send 1099s to all of our hosts in the United States.
So the 1099s go to all the hosts, and then they have to pay their federal and state income tax based on that.
That's correct. And again, it's important to note that no other federal agency would have access to those private taxpayer data in the 1099, say, for land use or other types of enforcement. And that is one of the critical concerns that we have. There is a distinct difference between information that individual taxpayers provide to tax collectors and that third parties like us, through contracts with cities, might provide to tax authorities. In fact, in the city of San Francisco and in many other cities, there is statutory protection which prohibits the tax collector from sharing tax data with any other enforcement agency outside of a subpoena.
So with regard to your concern about privacy, but yet when you look at the privacy agreements, and I'm assuming that Senator had passed out to it, says the report required pursuant to subdivision is confidential and should not be shared or disclosed, and that doesn't solve or resolve any of your concerns?
So I'm glad that he raised the issue and folks were looking at our terms of service, and I think you'll note that they're actually some of the most privacy protective terms of service for any corporation in certainly in the internet platform.
He was asking the question about the proposed amendments that he wants to introduce today.
Because you're talking about privacy issues and concerns of user data and taxpayer data, but yet what I'm hearing from the author is the data that's going to be asked for is home, business address, night stayed, and room rate. I don't know that the bill specifically says that there's any private information on residents or renters. So I'm saying, so my question to you is, the report required pursuant to subdivision is confidential, not be disclosed. Does that not resolve your concerns?
No, it does not, and I think it's still a critical issue. There's two things here that are going on. One is this bill still requires or enables local governments to request user data for any variety of enforcement purposes without a subpoena or a warrant. And that is a concern regardless of whether they shield that from public disclosure or not.
So you still have a concern about user data for night stays, room rates, and address?
Absolutely. I mean, in cities where we are collecting and remitting occupancy tax, and that number of cities will increase, I am certain, in the near future, we may provide either anonymized transaction level detail or other data, and that is clearly laid out to our users in our privacy policy for tax collection purposes. I think there's a critical difference.
I think Senator McGuire.
Yeah, I just want to add.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, if you finish, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add something, because as we delve into this, as in the context of your question, as I've been doing the homework with Senator McGuire on this, it seems to me, and this is trying to figure out how we really do make sure the witnesses that talked here, that everybody pays, right? And there's really three kinds of these types of platforms that exist. The one that was just explained by the gentleman from Airbnb, where they're directly involved, participate. Then there is the type where they're really a classified ad. But somebody who has a company may advertise for something in Paris, all over the world, but they're a classified ad. They just simply, you pay the money to the company, right? And they then put an ad up like they do in the LA Times classified. And whatever the relationship is and the exchanging of money happens directly between the two. The question there is, how do you collect that? Then there's a hybrid, I'm told, which I think we'll hear about today, where they go out to like a PayPal type organization, who, as defined in the bill, their business model is not what the bill says is a hosting platform as a marketplace primarily purposed for facilitating rentals. They're just a credit card company that collects the money and doesn't get involved. So you have this array of circumstances. And so if you're a local city, the question is, how do you really get a level playing field? The second thing I want to share, just in terms of the discussions we've been having with the author about how do you actually do this and make sure people pay? The truth of the matter is the law, local laws, what we're really dealing with here is local government has laws. The people in the communities aren't abiding by those laws. And so the state's trying to step in to say, we need to come up with a hammer, multi-$1,000 fines, and these processes to make those laws work. One of the things we discussed, but we never got very far, which is used in a number of other areas, in business licenses and other areas, is silver platter doctrine. If these people get 1099s, create a process whereby local jurisdictions, just like we do with business licenses, is exactly the same model, can simply get that information, because of course if anybody takes money, unless they're tax cheats, in addition to cheats in terms of the local law, have the ability to do that, exploring that. And the last thing is this last amendment, just to signpost it, that we got is not included in the analysis because it's the last minute, and it raises questions in our view in terms of what we do from a process standpoint, whether this requires a re-referral to either GO or to Judiciary Committee based upon its content with respect to the Public Records Act. We can address that, but I just want to signpost those as a relationship to the questions you asked, because we've been working on this so hard. Yes, sir, Senator McGuire.
No, thank you so much. And so I think the bottom line is that we want to be able to resolve this issue. And I've said this very clearly to all involved, whatever side you may be, this is an issue that needs to be resolved here in California, and frankly, across this nation. The privacy argument is the same argument that's been rolled out in Portland, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and in New York. The reason why we're taking a look at home business address, number of room nights, and room rates is because that is the only thing that works. So let's use New York, for example. They take 1% of all the users, and they do an audit. Well, what we're hearing from New York directly is that the information that comes back from the platform is old. And it doesn't go to the unit numbers, it just goes to the building. So you don't get an accurate read on how many units are actually within the New York system. The other piece is we can go city to city on this, but there are 431 cities right now that have bed tax ordinances in place. It's going to be the next decade. And just to be able to get Airbnb to the table in Malibu, they had to sue. There was a subpoena. So in San Francisco, it's been a 3-year battle, and frankly, it's now going to potentially be going to the voters next November. I believe this is a very reasonable piece of legislation that focuses on local control. And I'd like to be able to talk very quickly about the platforms. So You have Airbnb's platform where you pay directly. They could absolutely collect and do appreciate the work that they've been doing with some of the cities. They can collect. So if we look at vacation rental by owner, and I think they're probably going to talk about this, they do have a third party. We believe that if they are collecting the room rate via the website, it's covered in this legislation where it focuses on marketplace. So that is a marketplace, and we believe that it's covered within this legislation right now. On the classified, and I will say what I said in the beginning, I think the chair is absolutely right. We do need to be able to focus on the classified model where you simply put your home up and then you actually make direct communication with the individual homeowner. We do need to be able to focus in on that related to a certificate number or a license number. And let's just talk about the issue of code enforcement. So at the last hearing, Airbnb, with all due respect, said they don't want to be the code enforcement. They don't want to be the zoning police. And this bill puts the onus on the local government, rightfully so. So what we have said and what you have seen is that it be used for two ways. One, for remittance of taxes, and then two, they don't have to go the route of zoning. They can simply not book in that community. Or they can turn that over for code enforcement. It's already illegal in the community by local law. So I just want to make sure that's clear because it's not like we're making up the laws as we go. These laws have been on the books for years.
Okay, can we get the others? Anything further? Done? Any opposition? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Morlock had a question.
Mr. Owen, I just want to ask you a couple quick questions. You mentioned that you send 1099s to your renters, the hosts.
Correct.
And so that's for $600 or more. And then you're sending 599s to the Franchise Tax Board as well.
I would have to double check, but I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head.
So maybe not. On the 1099s, have you ever been audited by the IRS to make sure you're in compliance and reporting in full?
I also don't know the answer to that question, but I'm happy to look into it for you, Senator.
On your TOT with the city of San Francisco, do you have some kind of form that the city requires, and then do you send them the amount of TOT in bulk?
So I believe for the city of San Francisco, I can speak more clearly to a couple of other cities where I was involved in specifically discussing the ordinance, the agreement that we have. For instance, in the city of Portland, actually in both San Francisco and Portland, we provide anonymized transaction level detail, and there are audit provisions that enable them. In fact, we have been audited in both. I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble for saying that, but for those receipts, which enable the city to look at all of the transactions, the tax collector specifically, to understand that the tax is being paid. And again, to be clear, we recognize the importance of providing information in those limited circumstances to tax collectors to understand that the tax that's owed is being paid. I think the concern, again, that we have is whether that data would be compelled to be turned over for any other enforcement purpose, or whether we would be put in the position of being the local enforcement agency and figuring out. I appreciate the senator's suggestion that we simply go out of business in certain jurisdictions, but I think that many cities are working, including right here, the city of Sacramento last night, which held a hearing to develop new policies for home sharing, and I stayed with a great host last night who was very excited about that. So they're working on developing those policies as we speak, but when it comes to the tax collection issue specifically, we recognize the interest of tax collectors in the places where we're collecting and remitting already, and getting that information to be certain that they are in fact being paid what they are owed.
Okay, so great answer. So let me drill down a little bit more. You are giving the city of San Francisco a payment with a list of all the addresses.
We are providing transaction level detail to the city of San Francisco, and they have audited us in the past with that information.
What does that mean, transaction?
So for every transaction that occurs within the market, a list of the transactions so that they can see that the proper amount, the percentage is being collected on each of those transactions.
Yeah, you use the word transactions over and over, and it's not helping me. It's sort of like 90% miscellaneous, 10% other. I'm not getting the answer. So what are you giving when you give a list? What is a transaction? What is that? Is is it a name of a person?
So in the case of that particular city audit, we did not provide the names. However, we would certainly understand the interest of taxpayers and could do that in other jurisdictions. Again, that would be separate from what is required and compelled by this bill, which is to hand over that information for any enforcement purpose to, say, a land use or planning regulator.
Okay, thank you. So then, could you just give me the San Francisco story? Did they approach you? I mean, your headquarters are in San Francisco, so.
You have a few hours?
No, I don't. But did they approach you, or were you, you're involved in the community, so you know the supervisors and city council members, and they kind of said, hey, Mr. Owen, let's work together, or what?
So we had an ongoing discussion with the city for probably the last 3 or 4 years around all aspects of regulation, from short-term rental regulations to tax collection. In 2012, the tax collector issued a regulation which in their position clarified that these taxes were both applicable to short-term rental stays in private residences, and also that the obligation for collecting them extended to third-party internet platforms. At the time, we took issue with that regulation, and it raises an interesting question in this legislation, in fact, about whether this bill would extend existing taught statutes for collection to third-party platforms or merely authorize cities. And I think there's a great deal of confusion there, including amongst cities, even looking at the staff report from the city of Santa Monica, where they note that this bill would empower them to begin collecting and remitting occupancy taxes. So I think that question alone highlights the complication of this issue. We would love to continue this discussion and find solutions that work for our community and for cities around the state of California to ensure that our community is paying in the most efficient way possible their fair share. Unfortunately,
and I guess where I'm going is, you're already voluntarily working on a solution, and I'm just trying to figure out if we're trying to fix something that's already being fixed in a cooperative manner between industry and government, and that's what sounds like that's what you're doing.
We are indeed already working on this solution. We're already collecting and remitting and talking to more cities about doing so, I don't know that I would characterize this legislative process to date as collaborative, but certainly would look forward to working with yourself, the sponsor, and the committee chair and others to have a much broader conversation in the months ahead about how to expand this from that perspective, if it makes sense. But we are already working on this. We are committed to working on this, and I think you can see that in the increasing number of cities where we're collecting and remitting voluntarily. And I will also point out, are the only platform that is doing so at this point.